Good morning. It's morning time in LA. Good morning, fellow babies. Welcome back to the Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. SIFTD patrons, thank you so much. We could use a little more support. We've actually seen the number of supporters increase and the level of support decrease. So we're running in place. Shane is not trying to get rich on this. He's trying to make ends meet. So we could use a little tiny bit more help. If you're watching this on SIFTD and you're enjoying it, please see if you can dig down and put in an extra latte or something in your patronage. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'd love to have you on SIFTD a week earlier. So you're welcome to join at SIFTD.net, and you can find or at the Patreon. There's a link at the Patreon page. So any way you want to do it, we appreciate it. From YouTube, our first question, Jason Brown. What do you think of first-party Microsoft games being added to the Xbox Game Pass on their release dates? Considering that they are now available for $10 a month instead of $60 for the game, is it a good idea on Microsoft's part? How will this decision affect retailers? The answer is Microsoft doesn't have that many first-party games that are big sellers. So they probably have about 4 or 5 a year that are AAA title kind of games. Probably, they have another dozen that are smaller titles. Of the 5 or 6 a year, I'd say the Gears franchise, Halo franchise, Forza franchise. Those are big, immensely popular franchises. They sell millions and millions of units. I think probably 10 million for a game like Halo. Possibly that many for Gears. But many of the other titles are smaller and nichier titles. So I think that it's highly unlikely that more than 10% of the Xbox audience, buys their average title per year. The Xbox audience probably buys about 4 games, maybe 5 games a year, if we're not counting, independent $10 titles. And, so probably at most one of those is a Microsoft title. And so the question is, are you going to pay $10 a month to get one Microsoft title? Not really. I mean, it'll push you over the top, agreed. But, I think that Microsoft's looking at this like, we're only getting $60 from this person. If we can get $120, we make more money. Your question suggests that they're getting $180 from everybody because they're buying 3 titles. And they'll go down to only paying $120, so Microsoft loses. I don't think so. Is there a person out there who buys every single game Microsoft puts out? Of course there is, but not very many. And so I would say at the margin, if they add 1 million gamers because of this offer, probably 800,000 or 900,000 of them were only buying one Microsoft title before. So Microsoft still doubles its revenue. And how does it affect retailers? Obviously, retailers would rather you show up to their store and buy in person and pay at retail, and they collect their margin, which is about 20%. So a $60 game is about a $12 gross profit to the retailer. The more you buy online, the less you're buying at retail. So if you're buying it online, whether you're paying monthly as a subscription or you're buying a full game download, that hurts retailers. The vicious circle here is that if retailers lose profits because people buy more online, ultimately you're going to see retailers go away. And the poster child for this is Blockbuster. So if you remember, we used to only be able to rent a movie in physical form. You'd buy rent a videotape in the early 90s and a DVD in the late 90s and the first decade of this century. And if you rented it, you could go to a mom and pop store, you could go to Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, Movie Gallery. And what happened was that people got their television somehow connected to the internet, whether that's through Apple TV or Fire TV Stick or Roku Box or something, or Smart TV. And suddenly we got the opportunity to rent on iTunes or rent from Amazon or rent from your cable system. And so the more opportunities we had to rent on a digital basis, the less we went to Redbox or Blockbuster. And so first all the mom and pop guys went out of business, then Movie Gallery, and then Hollywood Video, and then Blockbuster finally. That's what you're going to see with retailers of video games. unless we achieve a balance between physical sales and digital sales. Yes, your question's spot on. Microsoft's Game Pass is going to impact retailers, it's going to cut into retailer sales and profits. Retailers are going to start to go out of business or stop carrying video games altogether. There was a news item last week. Best Buy stopped selling music CDs. Why? Because very few people buy music CDs. So great question. I don't think it hurts Microsoft. I do think it hurts retailers. I don't think it hurts Microsoft at all. So I think that ultimately all they're really trying to do is turn a $60 customer into a $120 customer. And frankly, as Game Pass evolves, I think you're going to see more features and more functionality. They'll probably start, renting you movies that way. I mean, I can see them bundling that in with Netflix to be a different hook. So yes, good question actually. Our second question from Patreon, from Guillermo Sena, or Senya, not sure which. Hello, Mr. Pack. Hello, Mr. Sena. Rockstar has delayed Red Dead Redemption 2, there's a frickin' shocker, to October. There's a frickin' shocker. Would it be wise for other game companies to delay or rush their flagship titles to avoid competing with Rockstar? That's a really good question. Or is that late year period too important to give up? Do you have any guess on how much Red Dead Redemption is going to sell this year? It's really funny. When Titanfall 2 came out, I had a conversation with Dusty Welch and Vince Zampella, and it was just kind of they're friendly with me, good guys, and we were just kind of talking about the timing of their game launch and how it came out a week in front of, I think, a week behind Battlefield 1, and so it was like really crowded, and obviously Electronic Arts published both games, so EA could control the window. So it's not like they were competing with a Rockstar title. But in fact, we know, in hindsight, that Titanfall didn't sell very well. Certainly not relative to, expectations or its rating, which is really high. And so I had a nice long talk with those guys about windows and how you select them. And nothing. It wasn't a bash on the air. And we were just talking about how do you do it? And so they were asking me, what I thought of games launching in April, May, which I personally think is brilliant. The original Watch Dogs was there. Last Red Dead was there. I think that's just a great window. People are interested in games. They're not out of school, screwing around in the summer. There's plenty of time to play games, and I just think it's a real cool window. And so they asked me if I thought in April, May of 19 or April, May of 20, just throwing it out there, because this conversation was back in 2016, did I think GTA was coming out? And I said, 0 probability. First of all, I don't think GTA is coming out in 19 or 20 at all. And second, not in May. It's just not happening. So they said, so we could actually have those windows to ourselves. And I joked, unless Red Dead slips to May of 19, which I really think is possible. So now I'm sorry, that was an anecdote, but this is a great question. So look, Red Dead is an interesting title. Red Dead is a very niche-y Western that a gajillion people like. So of course it's going to sell well. Little known fact, the last one sold 8.5 million units in its first year. Okay, it's not a top 20 best-selling game, top 40. It's just not. So, I know that you hear people saying, the last Red Dead sold 15 million or 18 million. Yeah, lifetime. And pull out a calendar and look at what month this is, okay? It's February of 2018. Do you have any idea when that last one came out? May of 2010. It's almost 8 years old. Of course it sold an extra 10 million units in the next 8 years. So who cares? Truth be told, I think that since this last GTA sold more than twice as many units as any GTA in history, it sold 90. I think the highest prior to that was about 40. You just have a giant installed base of people who love GTA, and by extension, I'd say at least half of them, maybe 2/3 of them, love Rockstar. I'd say maybe a third of them don't even know who makes the game, because that's just how gamers are. But 2/3 probably do, and who are committed that, hey, I really like Rockstar, so I'm going to look at their next title and give it a shot. But let's kind of compare and contrast. I'm a huge Fallout dork. I'm a massive Fallout dork. And I had, I don't know, 220 hours in Fallout 3, 300 hours in Fallout 4. I can't get enough Fallout. I can't wait for Fallout 5. I hate Elder Scrolls. Why? Because I fucking hate slaying dragons with swords. I think that's the dumbest thing ever. I hate bows and arrows. I hate shields. I hate being on foot or on a horse. I just hate that shit. So, okay, that's me, right? I don't hate the game. I don't hate Bethesda. It's just not my kind of game. So I'm thinking, if you play GTA and you're like, oh, we can steal nuclear weapons and then take, sell those and take the profits and build a meth lab and then take the profits from that and buy helicopters, a fleet of helicopters. That's really fun. But in Red Dead, it's like, oh, we can make moonshine and we can take the profits from that. And maybe if we sell like a few thousand bottles, buy a horse. How fun. So it's different. And I'm not mocking Red Dead. It's a different experience. Red Dead, the last one, was really fun. But it was more the story, and it was like just, if you look at the map, you went from like North Texas down into Mexico and back up into Oklahoma territory. There was so much going on, and it just like, you could have played that game for 200 hours. So do I think Red Dead's going to do great? Yes. Do I think it's going to sell more than 8.5 million? Yes. I have, in my model, I have 11.5 million in the launch quarter, so in the December quarter. I have 4 million of reorders, so I get to 15.5 million in the March quarter. Their fiscal year ends there. So I'm roughly double. Could it do 18? Sure. Could it do 24? I don't think so, but possibly. I mean, I don't know. Like, that would make it, a top 10 all time. That would make it Call of Duty size. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how good it is. But as far as the window, we get 4 or 5 big marquee titles every holiday quarter, every year. And as you know, you can count on Call of Duty. It comes out every single year. And then every other year or so we get a Star Wars. Every other year or so we get a Battlefield. Every year until recently we got an Assassin's Creed. Every 8 years, 6 years, whatever, you get a big Bethesda title. A Fallout, or of this past year, Wolfenstein and Elder Scrolls, which, by the way, I think Elder Scrolls is coming, but probably not this year. But there's always a bunch to choose from, and gamers tend to pick more than one. So, will it impact sales of everything else? Yeah, I think if you have a crappy little title, you can probably avoid it. If you have a Western, you're going to avoid it for sure. But do you really think like Mortal Kombat worries about Red Dead? Like, I don't. I don't think it matters at all. You think Assassin's Creed really worries about going up against Red Dead? I don't. Think Battlefield worries? I don't. So no, I don't think most people will avoid that quarter. I do think Titanfall would have avoided that May launch if Red Dead had been, delayed to May, because they're both niche-y kind of titles, and they like to have all the news and stuff. And to be honest with you, I actually thought Red Dead was going to launch on June 12th, which is the first day of E3, because I thought the Rockstar guys were going to try to steal all the headlines, and I thought that would have been a brilliant window. So I'm guessing it's going to sell 15. That's in my model. That's really the number I think. It would not shock me if I was off by 20% and it sold 18. If it gets a bad review score, which I'd say very slim chance that it gets below a 90, because these guys really are good. But if it gets like an 80 review score, then give my number a haircut. It's not selling 15. I don't think it's going to get an 80, so I think review scores matter. We saw that with Star Wars. Star Wars got a crappy review score, sold 7.5 million units. What a shocker. The last one sold 13. So, you guys out there will shun a game that is bad. Good for you. Your money is too important to waste on crappy experiences. So our next question from Patreon from Delta Prime. Hey, Pac, regarding the recent rumors that Microsoft's going to buy EA, Valve, or PUBG Corp, I know you think there's little chance Microsoft will buy EA, and I agree with that. Well, gee, thank you. You should agree with me on everything. What is the likelihood that Microsoft might buy older IP like Burnout, Need for Speed, SimCity, or Command & Conquer from EA to boost their first-party lineup? Which publishers to developers do you think Microsoft might actually purchase? Well, zero chance that they get Need for Speed, because that's in current production, so no. SimCity, same thing. I mean, those are franchises I don't think are for sale. Command & Conquer, maybe. The interesting thing is that the guy who made that, I believe, was Lewis Castle, and Lewis is an Amazon employee. So I think that because you have Lewis available to work on it at Amazon, it would make much more sense to me that Amazon would make that purchase, but you never know. Yes, I think the answer is they probably could buy older IP. I'd like to see them buy something iconic, like Dig Dug or Earthworm Jim or something fun, because you could just do something cool with that. And I don't know if you guys paid attention this year, but we had the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. That is as old as IP gets. It's PS1, so I mean, to take a PS1 game and turn it into a 3D cool, PS4 game, that's really cool. So those kinds of things I think could be done by Microsoft, and I think probably smarter to do a partnership with the IP owner and come up with something cool, which is what Crash was. As far as I actually personally think PUBG is happening. I think that they're going to buy something like PUBG. That exclusive, I still haven't seen PUBG show up on the PlayStation. It's been exclusive since December 12th. No word about it coming out on PlayStation. Why? I think because they've been negotiating buying the company. So, maybe, I don't know if they can afford the company. Maybe they don't want to spend $1 billion. If they wanted to buy, a developer, there's a handful of really good ones out there. I don't know if any of these guys are for sale, but the remaining independents are like the Gearboxes, the Insomniacs, Epic. I think Epic partly owned by Tencent, so probably not happening. Valve probably not for sale, but they're independent. I think those all make more sense. Bethesda for sale than buying EA. I just don't think you can buy EA and deal with the FIFA organization, because sales get cut in half, because you're only selling it on one console. I don't see them boosting Xbox One's lineup. Here we are in 2018. So the earliest that they could get a game out is 2019, 6 years into the cycle? No. If I could see them buying somebody for the Xbox 2 or whatever they're going to call the next thing. I don't see it. So I think this rumor is stupid. I think it came up 5 years too late. In 2011, this made sense, or 2012, not now. So don't think it's going to happen. Question from Twitter from @JosephKun. I'm beginning to drink scotch on a budget. Any tips? The thing about scotch is, if you've not had it before, I would recommend starting with a good blended scotch, because they're very smooth. And so good is better than Johnny Walker Black. Shockingly, a really inexpensive scotch is Dewar's, Dewars. Dewar's is about $20 a bottle, and it's actually quite good for an inexpensive scotch. But just so you know, just so you get a concept of budget scotches start at $30. And, I know that sounds like a lot of money, and you're like, well, I can buy a 6-pack of beer for like $3 or $4 if you buy the really crappy beers. Good Mexican beers are about $1 a bottle, so $6 maybe for a 6-pack. You think about it, the alcohol content, just so you get kind of put this in perspective, the alcohol content of beer is, around 6%, right? So 6 bottles, 6 times 6, 36% of 12 ounces a bottle is about 4 ounces of alcohol. A bottle of scotch is about 10 or 11 ounces of alcohol. So it's about 2.5 6-packs of beer in terms of the buzz factor. And the reason I bring that up, I'm not suggesting you drink just to get drunk. The buzz factor really is more of a measure of how much you consume, because most of us don't drink and get drunk. So, for me, I'm very fortunate. I have a little filter in my brain, and when I start to feel impaired, when I'm starting to get buzzed, it doesn't taste good to me anymore. I kind of realize I'm getting buzzed and I stop drinking. So my point is, if your alcohol tolerance, let's just say, is 6 beers, right? Yeah, that would be, for me, about 2 scotches and I'm done, right? 2 1/4 scotches. So so you don't really consume as much. So the right way to think about this is, if you're going to drink 6 beers, which is really a lot, you can drink like 4 or 5 scotches, 4 or 5 ounces, for better, experience. And that's only, a bottle's 25.3 ounces. That's only a fifth of a bottle. If a bottle costs 30 bucks and a 6-pack of beer that you would really like is $6, costs you about the same. I mean, that's the truth. It's like, you know, $6, $7 per sitting for scotch, and you're getting a really, really good experience. So I would not buy anything other than maybe a Dewar's. Now the better blended, you know, Chivas is better. It's not that much more, 23, 24, 25 bucks. But I personally think single malts are the way to go. So the stuff that, you know, I'm seeing here that's really not bad, there's a Japanese whiskey, Shinsu Mars EY. I don't care for it, but I find it a little too light. But if you want to start and try a Japanese whiskey, $27.99. That's not bad. You know, and again, $27.99 for 25 ounces. You know, it's a little over $1. It's $1.10 per ounce. So for a drink, that's like a Mexican beer, $1 per bottle. It's not crazy. You know, if you're on a budget, and again, I don't know your situation. If you only make, you know, $5 an hour and you're a babysitter and you can't afford anything more, okay, I get it. But if you're an average person making, you know, $35,000 a year, which is kind of the average, you know, young person starting out after college wage, then really your scotch budget should be like $500 a year. You know, we're not talking about going crazy here. We're talking about $10 a week, you know, so you should be able to find that. The next one, which is very popular, is Glenlivet 12-year-old. It's $29.99. I think Glenlivet's really good. I prefer Glenfiddich, which is, I'll come to it, but it's a little more expensive. Then they've got, I'm on K&L now, they've got some cool stuff that you could try that you've never heard of. Loch Lomond, Lochlomond, 32 bucks. I really like this scotch, and this is inexpensive. Glenmorangie, the original. It's 10-year-old whiskey, $32.99. I think everything that says Glenmorangie is worth buying, but I would go for those. Balvenie is typically about 40 bucks. Really, really, really good. So my favorites are probably Balvenie, Aberlour, Glengarioch. I think you'd be really happy with any of those. You can do Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, Glengoyne. They're all a little less expensive, and blended Dewar's if you just super budget. We'll be back in a week. Happy February, and see you next week. Thanks for joining.